Simulation of MMS reporting with gooseAir. The first thing we need to do is to check settings and status of gooseAir services. The settings are all accessible via gooseAir server web interface. The gooseAir machine is located at this IP address. And after a successful login, the main window will appear. For now, it is important to notice these two services, SAG, which is used to simulate IEC 61850 server, and GAS, which is used to simulate the IEC 61850 client. By green color, we can recognize that these services are already started, and if they are not, we can simply activate them by clicking on a Start button. Besides GAS and SAG services, we also need to check the network settings. We go Network, Status. In this simulation, we are going to use this interface. And these are all available IP addresses. Now, when we know for sure that all of the services we need are active and that we have IP addresses available, I will open the gooseAir application and start a new project. First thing we need to do is to import the STL file which will be used for simulation. I will use an ABB STL file. So basically we are now adding a static STL file in the gooseAir environment which will be used later on by IEC 61850 server service when simulating a live IED. The file is imported and now we can see the STL object tree. The easiest and most convenient way of checking content of the STL file is by using Explore option. I right click on the STL file, choose Explore, and all of the other options appear above. So now we can use these options to filter out the STL objects that we are looking for. For example, all Delta dataset objects will be located here. All report control blocks will be located here. We can see that there are 5 buffered report control blocks. And there's only one unbuffered report control block. We can also see the basic attributes of the buffered control block class model, like report identifier, which is used by client in order to distinguish reports from various buffered report control blocks. Then we have the report enable attribute, which is used to start and stop generating reports. Dataset reference, which specifies the object reference of the dataset used in reporting. Configuration revision, optional fields, buffer time, sequence number, trigger options, integrity period, general interrogation, purge buffer, entry ID and time of entry. All of the attributes are explained in detail in 7.2 part of the IEC 61850 standard. The next thing we do is adding the MMS Server service. For the purpose of MMS reporting, only these two services will be used, MMS Client service and MMS Server service. We choose MMS Server and type the IP address. Now, when it comes to assigning an IP address to a service, we can use the same IP address as long as the services are different, which means we can assign this IP address to MMS Server and also to MMS Client service, which I will do later on, but we cannot assign one IP address to the two different MMS Server services. Finish. And in the Service Explorer window, we see that the MMS Server is added on the IP address that we've chosen. The service is color green, which implicates that the connection is established. If we disconnect the connection, the color will go black. In order to simulate a live server, we must assign an STL file to the server service, which is why we imported the STL file at first place. Right click on the service, choose Add Device, and from the drop down menu we see all of the imported STL files, so we chose the only one present, which is the ABB STL file. In the IP address drop down menu, gooseAir is now offering all of the available IP addresses that we previously added. We can see those addresses again at gooseAir server web interface. This is the address we assigned to MMS service, and we will simulate a live ID on, for example, this IP address. For the purpose of MMS reporting, we are using port number 102. To make service simulate a live ID, we must check both of the options offered. Only by uploading STL3 and activating device, an ID shall not be recognized by the client, so we must check Start Emulating Device option. It may take a few moments while the service is reading the STL file. Now we are simulating a server, and the next thing we do is adding a client. Add service, choose MMS Client, and we are going to use the same IP address which we used for starting the MMS Server service. Now we need to establish a connection between client and server, and we will do so by right-clicking on Client, choose Add Device, and in the IP address field we aim the IP address where the server is located. To establish a live connection, we also need to check all of the options. Click Add, and the connection is established. We can perform a fast test just to see is connection really established, and for this purpose I'm going to change the value of some data attribute just to see whether the change will be acknowledged by the client. I will approach this data attribute, for example, and now I'm going to change its value. Now I'm going to approach the same data attribute but from the client side to see if the client is aware of the changes. Click Refresh Value, and we see that the connection really is established and the client is aware of changes going on the server side. Now, before starting the MMS reporting, we must assign object reference of the dataset to a report control block. We simply have to copy the object reference of the dataset to the dataset attribute of the report control block. I will choose the same dataset as before. Right click, Copy object reference. And we copy the object reference to the dataset field of the appropriate report control block. And click Write Value. To start and configure MMS reporting, the gooseAir offers the report control option. We must mark the client, click Home, and choose the report controller option. The report controller option offers an overview of all the reports that can be generated on the simulated server within this STL file. We can see the result of copying object reference of the dataset that we've done a moment ago. To configure report, right-click on the report and then choose Configure Report. Here we can configure all of the optional fields and the trigger options. We will choose 3000 milliseconds for example. Check all optional fields and all of the trigger options. To monitor the Ethernet traffic between client and server, we need to turn on the Report Monitor option and start monitoring. Now we can enable report control block and the server will start generating reports. On the right side of the window we can see the reason for triggering the report, which is the integrity in this case, but we can also issue reporting by some other criteria like a data change or quality change. Now I'm going to approach the dataset used in reporting and change some dataset member value and its quality. And we see that the trigger in this case was caused by data change and quality change criteria. Integrity, data change and quality change are all issued by the server. On the other hand, client has an option to issue the general interrogation report at any time by enabling the general interrogation option. We see that the reason for inclusion this time was general interrogation. Thank you for your attention.